Box. It's time for our podcast.
It's Friday then. It's Saturday, Sunday. What?
You're listening to the Pitwall Girls podcast, hosted by Darlene and Adriana.
I guess we go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pitwall Girls. I'm Darlene. And we're here to talk all things Japan 2024 GP. It was actually a really exciting race. Max did win, spoiler, but that was to be expected. But we had so many overtakes. We had a red flag. That's always exciting. We didn't have wet tires. There was no rain during the actual race. But it was still a great race.
Yeah, and quali was really close, Max could have, in another alternate universe, he was close to not getting pole. Like if Checo had gotten like a slightly faster quali time, it would have been fun to see if that would have changed anything. I'm sure Max would have just overtaken him eventually anyway, but it was closer than recent qualis.
I'm starting to get flashbacks because obviously the race was at it was so late. Everything was so late. So I was watching very early in the mornings. But after qualifying, the interviewer asked Checo, he goes, "Checo, what did you have? A lion?" And I don't know why I thought that was hilarious. Did you eat a lion?
Yeah.
But I was here thinking it's like, what did Max eat then?
Not sure how to respond to the question.
It's like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't even get pole. Maybe the guy was confused and he thought Checo got pole, but I did think that was hilarious.
Well, I think, Checo is not always the best quality performer. And last season, a lot of the time he didn't qualify very well and he was like having to overtake a lot. And same for this season. So maybe it was about like, finally a solid quality performance for Checo, like where, you would expect him to be at a Red Bull. Like if Max is so fast, you would expect Checo to be in P2. So maybe that's what that was about.
Yeah. Charles, who usually is a great qualifier, said that his strength became his weakness this race and that he paid for it.
Yeah, he seems confused as to where his one lap qualifying pace has gone. It's usually his strength. So yeah, I think he's still trying to figure out the car, but he did pretty well in the race itself. So
he did the best he could. We did have a Ferrari on podium. Carlos is killing it.
He is on fire.
Sad. How off were my predictions? Who did I predict to win the race? I predicted Carlos to win the race. I predicted Lando P2 or P3. I don't even know. And Max not winning the race, which is very far off. Sad to not have any McLarens.
I think I predicted Max to win Sainz and Lando. So I was close, but
you
missed
were
out
close.
on Checo.
Yes. Checo did seem to have a really great race. McLaren's strategy, I don't know what's going on there, but it's killing them.
Yeah. So we could get into, the overall race and what happened. So recap of just the results. If you want to start there, is that Max won. Checo came in second, Sainz podiumed in third, and then after that was Leclerc, Norris, Alonso, George Russell, Piastri, Hamilton, then Yuki Tsunoda getting in the points in his home race. But that is a little bit surprising the way that it shook up, just because Lando, as we spoke about, did get P3 in quali. So he was starting, second row, pretty strong qualifying performance. So I was expecting him to carry that into the race, but this was a race with a lot of tire strategy. So
yeah. He said that they were not fast. He had a couple of the fastest laps throughout the race. I was seeing him get the fastest lap, and he did so many overtakes. So I really do think it was down to their strategy and the amount of pits they had at the wrong time.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why he did have a lot of overtakes and was getting a lot of fastest lap in that earlier part of the race was because they pitted Lando so early the first time. So I think they pitted him, I don't know, like lap 12 or 13 the first time to switch from mediums to hard. So I think some of the early overtakes was just due to him being on the newer tire. So if we want to talk like overcutting, undercutting, this race was definitely a race where the undercut was really strong. So what that means is Suzuka, in any conditions, but particularly when it's warmer, is a really high tire degradation track, which means like the longer you stay out there on old tires, you're going to be at a major disadvantage compared to people who have recently pitted to newer tires because the fresher tires are just going to be, a lot faster than the older tires, and tire degradation is a huge problem. So when you first pit to fresh new hards or fresh new set of tires, you're going to just be faster just because of that tire offset than the people who are staying on their old tires and trying to like extend their stint. So that's sort of the strategy behind pitting early. I heard that Lando maybe pitted earlier to try and cover George Russell, which doesn't really make sense because I don't know why that's who they were trying to cover.
Yeah, I was so confused. So I take little notes during the race and I wrote lap 22, Lando did an undercut. And then Perez overtook him right after. But then again, lap 27, Leclerc and Lando pit, and even Lando asked, why am I boxing so early? And they said to cover George, which when Lando came out of the pits, he then had Leclerc and George in front of him. So I think it failed. Strategy failed.
Yeah, I think the strategy, was not super sound. I don't know. McLaren kind of dropped the ball. Piastri also was never able to catch Alonso, and then ended up on the very last lap being overtaken by George Russell, which I don't know what George Russell's deal is with the last lap overtakes. And like, I feel like Piastri like just didn't fight because he would rather finish the race and be overtaken rather than being crashed by George Russell on the last lap.
Which we know he will do.
He's prone to do, so I don't know what it is about George Russell in the last lap action, but yeah, so Piastri was never able to get Alonso, ends up being overtaken, ends the race in P8. He started the race in P6, so that's disappointing. Norris started the race in P3, ended the race in P4 or P5. Also disappointing. And I think it's also disappointing because this was supposed to be a good track for McLaren. I think last year they double podiumed here. Everybody was expecting them to do well. And so I think it's disappointing because it's one of the tracks that suits their car the best. And it also shows that they haven't made improvements on their weaknesses, which is the slower turns and the hairpin, which is where they were losing the most time in this race. So they haven't improved on their weaknesses, and they may just be losing out to Ferrari in terms of improving on their strengths. So disappointing for me, for McLaren. I think they're solidly their fastest car, but yeah.
Well, someone who had a lot to say about their slow car was Lance Stroll, who said it's unbelievable how bad our speed is at the straights, man. It's like a different category. And I mean, it doesn't sound that bad, but it was the way he said it on the radio, just having a little tantrum attack.
Yeah,
I thought it was
he
hilarious.
sounded like he was on the verge of tears, like the way he was saying
it. Yeah, like his voice was almost cracking. Yeah. Well, does that mean that they had better speeds on the turns? They have better like low speed? I don't understand. Well, like, was the car just better in some areas and worse in others?
I don't know. I think it's a common complaint that we've heard from the Aston Martins. Both Stroll and Alonso in the past have just commented when other people have had more straight line speed than them. So I don't know what that means. I mean, obviously Alonso ended the race P6. So, clearly like the car was like, I think this was one of his better performances. And I think this is his best performance in Japan since 2013 or something. So clearly something was working well for him.
He was happy to be in an Aston Martin and not in a Mercedes.
Yeah, he had some post-race comments being asked about, potential moves to Mercedes, and he didn't directly answer it, but he was saying, that's not that appealing because currently my car is faster. So yeah, I don't know what happened to Stroll, but
yeah,
I don't think it's so much the car. I feel like it's Stroll.
Yeah, well, Mercedes is leading. I'm taking that out. Mercedes is leading at 34 over 33 points for Aston Martin. So yeah, kind of confused by Alonso's comment, but it's his own world he lives in.
If Lance Stroll was more consistently in the points or, putting himself in good qualifying position, then yeah, Aston Martin collectively would probably have more points and might be beating Mercedes in the drivers. So, if they had another driver more close to Alonso's talent.
Yeah. Should we talk about Alpine for a second? So they did bring in.
We've kind of glossed over everything, but yeah, you mentioned there was a red flag in this race.
Oh yeah. So this is chaotic. Let's take it back to quali.
Okay, let's take it back to quali. Yeah. Overall, not a good weekend for Williams all around, but let's start quali.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Alpine bringing upgrades, and I saw hopes for at least Ocon. He made it to Q2, which he ended up just in P15, but out of Q1, he was like in P12 or P13, which was a big improvement. But at the end of Q2, ended up in P15, so not that much. And yeah, Gasly did not take advantage of the upgrades whatsoever. So I guess it's not actually a step in the right direction how they had hoped for. Okay, and then Williams. So we know Williams only has one chassis, or they have two chassis, but they don't have a spare chassis. And that means that they had to take care of their car, which they did not do. So like you mentioned, Logan crashed in free practice 1. This isn't even quali. Wow, we really are all over the place. Yeah, it's fine.
We're all over the place. So before quali, free practice 1, the first practice session, Logan crashes in like crazy fashion. Like it was a pretty bad spin. A lot of damage to the car to the extent that he wasn't able to participate in FP2. Which ended up being fine because it was kind of rainy and a lot of teams ended up not taking full advantage of FP2 anyway. A lot of the Red Bulls just didn't even go out. So him missing FP2 wasn't that big of a deal. But what is a big deal is that he crashed to the extent where they weren't able to run in FP2, which means they were doing a lot of repairs. Williams brought upgrades for both cars to Japan, and crashing obviously sort of makes those upgrades a waste because then they have to go back and redevelop.
Mm-hmm.
And so Logan does that in FP1. And then, do you want to talk about what happens in the race with the other Williams?
Yeah, so lap 1, I don't think lap 1's even complete. No, and Alex and Daniel make contact. Daniel spins out, so does Alex Albon. The race gets red flagged. It's the end of the race for both Daniel and Alex. Very disappointing. Yeah. And I knew this was going to be said, but they said, oh, wow, Daniel didn't get to partake in free practice 1. And then there was basically like no FP2. So he really didn't know the track. He really didn't know the car. But it's just like Daniel seems to be involved in a lot of lap 1 incidents. Have you noticed?
I don't know if I've noticed, but yeah.
I cannot pinpoint them, but he's been in a couple of like lap 1 incidences. Or like if there's
been, it is a trend. So, a lot of people have been debating whose fault was it. At the end of the day, FIA ruled that it was just a racing incident. They didn't place blame on any of the drivers. And, nobody got penalties or anything. But, Albon essentially got a much better start than Ricciardo. So I don't think that Ricciardo was expecting Albon to be there because, Ricciardo was starting P11, and I forget where Albon was starting, but it was further back. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he was expecting anyone to be on his right. And so he was mostly looking to his left to make sure he doesn't bump into Stroll, I believe. And so, some people are like, he should have also looked to his right. Like, he should have also made sure that he's not squeezing anyone out. I don't think it was Albon's fault. He was just trying to get the racing line that he wanted. And he got a good start, so he was just trying to take advantage of that and overtake. So it probably wasn't anyone's fault, but really unfortunate that happened. Obviously for Ricciardo, it's unfortunate because he's under a lot of pressure right now. Mm-hmm. And then for the Williams, it's just unfortunate because this means that the upgrades they brought to both of their cars are pretty much for nothing because both cars crashed out at some point in the weekend. And so they have to go back and, reinvest that money to make changes and just going to put them further back in the development timeline for any future upgrades. So
those Ford chassis, James Vow's face was just like pure disbelief. Like he
Yeah.
looks like he hates his life. But yeah, so Logan was driving Alex's repaired chassis that Alex had previously crashed. So that chassis has been destroyed a couple of times, and then Alex was driving Logan's chassis that had not been as damaged. Now they're both completely damaged.
Yeah,
the Monster chassis
near the
till
end,
Miami.
well, yeah, and near the end of the race, well, not near the end, I forget exactly what lap it happened, but Logan almost had another crash
Yeah,
where he was
yellow flags were
completely in
taken
this.
out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was completely in the sand, and I mean, good for him for like being able to stop it from being a crash and not getting into the barrier because he was able to back up and get back to racing. But I mean, I can't imagine that a bunch of sand and your broken and cobbled together chassis is that good of a thing either. Just adds more things that they have to figure out. Like I'm sure it's hard to get sand out of your car parts.
So
But yeah,
stressful
not
for them.
good for them. I'm sure they're in the lead for the world's Destructor
Destructor.
Championship.
They are winning that for sure. Okay, what else? So much happened. It was a great race. There was a lot of action towards the end, like you mentioned, George Russell loving some last lap action. But yeah, George and Oscar were battling it out till the end. Oh, Alonso slowing down to give Oscar DRS on George around allegedly, supposedly. Love that.
Where
Love
have
that
we
moment.
seen that before? A car giving a McLaren a tow to keep Mercedes
a
out.
true smooth operation.
Yeah, so similar to what Sainz did for Lando in the Singapore Grand Prix last year is what Alonso may or may not have done this time to keep Mercedes kind of behind Piastri, but that didn't end up not helping anyway because George was able to eventually overtake. There was that one near incident where George was trying to make a move on Piastri and Piastri was forced off track and came back, and then I think that incident was noted, but again, it was like no further action taken. Piastri didn't have to give the place back or anything because it was clear that
he was truly
had sort of been pushed off.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, I thought it was an interesting race because everybody was on essentially a different tire strategy. Some of the cars started on mediums, some on hards, I think some on softs. I think it was really troubling to me. I could tell that it was going to be a bad day for Mercedes after the restart, because at the restart, most of the teams were going back on mediums, and for some reason, both Mercedes were going out on hards, and that was immediate red flag.
Immediate red flag, yeah.
Of like, what are they doing? You know, whenever Hamilton's on like an alternate strategy, it never works for him, and he's always going to complain about being on the wrong tire. And he even asked mid-race, change the strategy.
Yep, he did. He demanded change the strategy right now. Yeah.
Yeah, because they were, on the hards trying to make it a one-stop, and it clearly was not going to work out. And it was going to need to be a two-stop. But yeah, I think it's really interesting when there's different tire strategies. It just adds a little bit more difference and variation to the race. And I think that's why we got to see so many overtakes, is because everybody was on different tires. So people's tires were degrading faster than others. And so that's why you get the cool overtakes and everything. So I thought that was fun. I mean, especially since there's only one DRS zone in this race, the only way we were going to get any other overtaking was probably going to be because of the tire offset. So that was fun. One driver who had some great overtakes was Yuki Tsunoda, hometown hero. He overtook in the S's, like around turn 6, which is like the part that kind of looks like S's. And they were commenting on that because that's not like the typical place where you would like to see overtakes. You know, it's not where the DRS zone is. So they were, congratulating him on the good overtakes. And yeah, happy to see Yuki Tsunoda get points in his hometown race.
Did you hear him on the radio when he was thanking his mechanics and his pit crew because did he do an overcut, an
Oh my
undercut?
God.
What did
Well,
he
so
do?
it wasn't even an undercut situation. It was that like four or five, I forget how many cars pitted at the same time.
And his
There was
was the
like,
fastest.
Magnussen, Bottas, him, and whatever. And he overtook like two cars in the pit lane because
Yeah.
his team was so fast and like they had the fastest pit stop. And so they were able to, make up like two places just in the pit
Yeah.
stop, which is like kind of unheard of. You never see that happening. Like,
Yeah.
you never see the car, behind somebody else on a pit stop getting out in front of them. Like, that never happened. So, yeah, he was being very cordial. He was thanking everyone.
I love that. We don't hear that a lot from him.
Top job.
It almost sounded sarcastic.
Yeah,
but it wasn't.
I think he was
it was
being
very
sincere.
genuine.
And
Yes.
I think they're trying to like put him on like a PR campaign because he's been doing a lot of sit down interviews. Like, he's talking about how he needs to, manage his anger more. Like, he's talking about how he's trying not to he's been told not to swear on the radio, and all that stuff. So I think he does seem calmer. And I think there were moments in the race where a previous version of Yuki Tsunoda might have been more emotional and maybe have like crashed into someone. There was some near incidents. So I think him being more calm and collected is working out for him. And maybe this is exactly what he needed to, start making more progress in F1.
Yeah, and I mean, he's definitely the better driver out of the two V-carb drivers right now. So I'm sure that's feeding into his confidence as well. He's out-qualified Daniel. He's outperformed Daniel in the race. So I'm sure he's maybe feeling less pressure.
Yeah, I think he did say he was feeling more pressure this week, just, being in Japan and everything.
Yeah.
But I think overall, I think he's kind of, steadily being more comfortable in the lead driver kind of role. That's really clear that he's a lead driver now, so that's probably got to make him feel more comfortable. And more mumblings about him possibly going to Aston Martin. So that would be exciting.
I have not heard those mumblings.
Yeah, there was this one fan who was wearing like an all V-carb getup, but then like underneath he had like a full Aston Martin getup, so he like stripped away his like V-carb stuff to reveal his Aston Martin outfit. And so I feel like maybe some people in Japan are also kind of banking on the fact that the Honda connection will get Yuki to Aston Martin eventually.
Okay, we shall see how the grid shakes up then. And then I am looking at the driver standing right now, and I was shocked to see that Charles is ahead of Carlos. I mean, I know why, because he skipped the race, but Carlos has been on all three podiums that he's raced for, but Charles has 59 points and Carlos has 55 points.
Yeah, and it's really just because of that one race that Carlos had to miss for his appendicitis surgery. Otherwise, he would definitely, because he's only behind Leclerc by like 4 points. So he would probably have gotten at least 4 points in the race that he missed. So we'll see how it shakes up. Either Leclerc might be due for a really good performance. He might also be due for like a DNF of some kind. We haven't seen any, Leclerc sitting on a hill looking sad because his engine
sad boy
failed.
Vibes. Yeah.
But I mean, we have to talk about Leclerc. I think we started talking about him earlier, and we didn't talk about his race performance.
Our driver of the day.
Yeah, I mean, he made the medium tires last longer than anyone. It's really the fact that he was able to extend the tire life of those medium tires, which I don't know was working for everybody else, but he was able to make them last a very, very long time. And so he didn't pit until much later than everybody else, and that's really why. And I was mentioning that there's a lot of tire degradation, so it was a disadvantage to be on the older tire. But in his case, he just made the mediums last and was able to manage them for so long that then he only had to pit the hards once.
He only had one pit stop. Yeah, I think he was race leader for like a few seconds. Yeah, well, he did get driver of the day. He was happy about that, but he was very vocal about how his quali cost him, and he could have probably ended up higher. Yep. Okay, shall we do our fave, WTF, and oh my god moments of the race?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I pre-wrote some. Okay, so I think my fave moment was hearing Lance Stroll on the radio. No, I lied. It was all the radios, but it wasn't that one. It was Lewis's. I prefer Lewis's radio actually. The change the
Change
strategy,
the
right, Matt?
strategy now.
Yeah, that I actually did love that moment. My WTF moment was lap one, Daniel and Alex crashing because like, oh, I was like, not right away. We had the race delayed by 30 minutes by that red flag. And then my oh my God moment was when the cameraman showed Daniel and Liam Lawson standing behind him.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, this is getting memed. Everybody's gonna take this screenshot. Like,
yeah, and they were both just so in their own world, but cameraman knew what he was doing.
yeah, Liam Lawson, reserve driver is he the reserve driver for Red Bull generally, or just for V Carb? I'm not sure, but he is
I think for both. I think they might share. Yeah.
But yeah, just waiting in the shadows until he's shot. It seems like he's pretty much been kind of told that he's going to get that V Carb seat, it sounds like. So
I'm rooting for him. You know what question came up during this race weekend? Antonio Giovinazzi, who used to be an F1 driver, he's also the Ferrari reserve. I wonder why Ollie was put in over him.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably seen all you need to see from Giovinazzi, like,
Got it.
what he's going to get you. And I think Ollie, they just wanted to see what he could do. Some more promising young drivers. So
I was curious. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any fave, oh my God, WTF moments of the race?
Well, my fave moment was just seeing Yuki, get into the points in Japan. I mean, all the Japanese fans were like cheering every single time he got an overtake. So it was fun to see him having so many overtakes, and I think he just did a really good job. And I'm Japanese, so I'm always gonna root for Yuki. Especially like he had a really bad start in the first, like the original start of the race, and then he had a better start in the restart. So that's I was just happy to see him in the points. My WTF, same as you, was the first lap incident, mostly because I was staying up to watch it. And I was like, are you serious? This always happens. I think this happened last year at Suzuka as well, where I was staying up to watch it. I was so happy, excited to watch it. And then I'm like, oh, are you serious? Red flag? I have to like stay up even longer. And then I ended up like kind of falling asleep and having to rewatch the race in the morning. But that was my WTF moment. And then my OMG was just a kind of a negative OMG of like, why are you pitting Lando so soon? I'm like, well, like what is happening with McLaren strategy? So that was sort of my like, OMG, like what is happening kind of moment. But
they need a new strategist. You should apply for strategist at McLaren. Yeah. Get in
probably
there.
not that qualified, but I did also enjoy all the radio messages, and my favorite radio message was George Russell at some point in the race saying that he felt like his helmet was flying off or something like that, and I was like,
I love the radio messages.
What
is
does that
it
mean?
not strapped onto your head?
I know,
right?
So that was funny, but yeah, really good race. I thought the other reason why this race was so unpredictable was because the track conditions were so different than on FP1. So not only did most teams miss out on FP2 because it was raining and they didn't want to risk going out, but the track temperatures were like much, much warmer on the race day compared to what it was in FP1. It was much cooler in the earlier part of the weekend, and on the race day it was actually really nice out. It looked beautiful there. Everybody switched from being in jackets to t-shirts, and that made a really big difference in tire degradations. I think one of the reasons why everyone was on a different tire strategy was because they didn't know what to expect, because it wasn't any of the same conditions that they had gotten any data
in the past.
So a little chaos, a little weather chaos, not rain, but just different temperatures.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think they should keep this race in April. It looked beautiful.
Yeah, with the cherry blossoms, it's so pretty. Yeah, they should definitely keep it. Like, I think it's great.
Yeah. Agree. Okay, what else do we want to talk about? Do we want to talk about a little F1 fashion with Sir Lewis Hamilton?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Get
It
into
seems
it.
like red is his favorite color nowadays.
I mean, he's always showing up in red. He's also doing this thing lately where he wears jackets without shirt underneath. That's kind of his like fashion statement as of
Okay,
late.
I'm gonna start paying attention to that. Well,
Yeah.
he was seen with like a little red vest and a white long sleeve, which it was very like Ferrari colors. But I thought he was just it was giving flag. It was giving Japanese flag.
Who knows? Maybe it was Japanese flag, maybe it was Ferrari red. He seems to be wearing red a lot lately, not just for the Japanese Grand Prix. So I feel
Yeah.
like I'm taking that as a sign, as he's just over it. He's looking
Hmm.
to the next thing. He's excited about going to Ferrari. Every time Sainz podiums, he's got to feel good about it because that's the car he's going to be in next year.
I don't know. What if he cannot get podiums in a Ferrari? What if it's just Carlos? I mean, Charles hasn't been getting podiums. Well, he got one,
Yeah,
but
but Charles is still doing better than the Mercedes. So I think either way, you would see it as an upgrade. I don't know, like tinfoil hat conspiracy theory is, Hamilton deliberately sabotaging Mercedes season this
he's
year.
definitely giving, I'm so done with Mercedes. Like, it's just done.
At the very least, I don't think he's like doing what he typically does, is like really helping the team maximize like the development, like testing out things, trying to get the most
Hmm.
out of the car. Like he's probably not going above and beyond in that aspect as he usually does. But yeah, I think he's just kind of checked out, looking for the next thing, wearing a lot of red. I think red looks good on him, even though Toto said otherwise.
Yeah, he said red was not his color. Well, I've been watching a lot of the post conferences, so post quali, post race, and Max was being hilarious. I think Max is always hilarious. But one of the commentators, I don't know what they asked, but it was something about Toto, and Max just starts laughing and goes, "Huh, Toto has been saying really nice things about me lately." And then he like smirked because obviously he knows there's an empty seat at Mercedes, which could be his if he wanted it. And then he also just said something about Carlos's mom. Like, she's like, maybe your mom does want your dad to go away and race so she gets some like free time. Like, he was just laughing at himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Max is low key very funny. Like he's not the driver you would think of to be hilarious, but I think he's also just so comfortable and he knows that he's the best, so he'll just like say random stuff.
Yeah, all the random stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else happen?
I mean, not too much. I think we're just kind of, getting into the season. We're like well into the season at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many rumors about, silly season yet, but I think we should be starting to hear some things soon. I know people have been waiting on Aston Martin to confirm that they're going to keep Alonso on for
Mm-hmm.
longer. Like I think in the paddock, there's been gossip that that announcement is coming, but it hasn't come yet.
Yeah.
And so does that mean that they're just waiting, or does that mean that potentially there's some issues there? Maybe they don't have Alonso secured for the next year. Not sure.
Yeah, we'll see. And Checo is someone else who said that his future at Red Bull will be determined very soon.
Wait, I totally forgot about another radio message that was kind of interesting, and I would love to know what you think about it.
Please
But I
share.
think it was after quali or
Uh-huh.
during the race. I forget what. But I think there was a radio message to Christian Horner from Checo being like, see, now you know like what it takes to like motivate me. And Chris Horner
Ooh,
responded like, yeah, I know, I've always known, that kind of thing. So, what does that mean? Does that mean, is that
spicy.
a contract? Is that a contract? Does that mean not favoring
Mhm.
Max Verstappen's car as much? Is that why he was closer in quali? I don't know. That's a spicy radio message to be
That
just
is
putting
such a
out
spicy
into the
radio
universe.
message. Yeah, I had not heard that, but I think that when Checo won Monaco, he was in the midst of contract negotiations. So maybe he is in the mix of contract negotiations right now as well. So he's like give me a
extra
good contract.
motivated,
I'll give
right?
you a better result. Ooh, oh my God, I need to go look this up. Maybe it was after, maybe it was after quali because he did have a stellar quali.
Yeah, but
Mm.
something to keep an eye on, and like then, I think a lot of people have been under the assumption that the Red Bull seat would be open. If it's not, it does have a lot of implications on the rest of the driver market.
Honestly, I think it would have been open for Daniel. I think a lot of people wanted it to be for Daniel, but I don't think people are rooting for that anymore. I'm a huge Daniel fan, and honestly, I'm kind of over this whole situation right now. Somebody commented on one of the stories I put up, and they said, "Not the Daniel slander," and I said, "Well, that's how the cookie crumbles." And they it was kind of a hilarious interaction with somebody who follows, and they're like, "Well, my cookies are still baking in the oven. I don't know about yours." They're like, "I'm just
Mine
delusional."
are
So
not baking in the oven
yours have crumbled,
anymore.
right? Yeah.
Mine have already crumbled, unfortunately. I mean, it's just he's constantly underperforming Yuki,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the benchmark. And like Yuki's not getting any attention for the Red Bull seat, so why should Daniel? If
Exactly.
Yuki's constantly doing better than Daniel and no one's thinking that Yuki will get the Red Bull seat, then why would Daniel deserve it? Um, so yeah, I think honestly keeping Checo would make sense for them because I think they want to put Liam Lawson in V carb first. I don't think they want to throw him into the Red Bull seat. I don't think they think he's ready
Not
for
a
that.
lot of people have done well when that's happened to them. So didn't they throw in Alex into the Red Bull and then, they had him replaced. They also threw Gasly in the Red Bull seat and then had him demoted. So it's very few people who could handle that pressure. I mean, Max, but not everyone is Max.
Yeah, and that car is just so fast and powerful, and yeah, it is. It's not just that it's a really great car, and I think part of the reason why Checo struggles sometimes is that Max makes it look so easy, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy being able to drive a car that's that powerful and that fast. And so some people say, oh, like they're favoring Max's driving style or whatever. Like, what if they were to give it closer to Checo's driving style? That would be a slower car, though. Like Checo might perform better relative to Max
Mm-hmm.
in a car that suits him, but that would be a slower car. It's not easy to do what Max is doing. He makes it look really easy, but it's not like you can put anyone in that fast car and it would be as fast as Max is making it look. So, yeah, I think it would be a struggle for Liam Lawson just to get thrown into that all of a sudden. So, yeah, otherwise, I don't know who else they would put in that seat. So,
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense to keep Checo.
I have a question for you. I just came up.
Okay.
If you could see any of the other 18 drivers on the grid right now in the RB, who would you want to see?
In the Red Bull,
Yeah, just to see, like, do they really have what it takes against?
I mean,
Like,
I
is
would love
Max
to see
that good?
Lando. I
You
would love to
would
see Lando in the Red Bull just to see what that would look like,
for him?
Because I
For
think
me, I
Lando's
would,
one of the better drivers.
yeah, I agree. I'm glad you picked Lando because then I would get to see. I'm going to pick Charles. I would want to see Charles in the RB.
Okay, question for you.
Okay.
Who is the better driver right now? Is it Charles or is it Sainz? And did
It's
Ferrari
Carlos.
make the wrong decision?
Yes. Yes. The better driver is Carlos, and I will go down fighting for him. I've always thought that Carlos is the better driver, and maybe it's not. I'm not saying he's naturally more talented, but I am saying he's more dedicated and he's more kind of like no excuses. Like, I feel like sometimes Charles, when things don't go his way, he'll be like, yeah, it was because of XYZ, but Carlos will find a way around it. He'll come up with another strategy. Like, so I think that's what makes him the better driver. And they did make the wrong choice by letting him go.
I think so too.
Okay.
I've heard some people also being like, is it recency bias? Because like, Sainz is doing really well this year, but it's not like he's always outperformed Charles. But I don't know. I also feel like, if Charles had had appendicitis surgery, would he have like come back immediately? Would he have done as well? Like, I just feel like you said, Sainz just like his heart's in it more. He's like committed. Yeah, it shows a lot of grit, that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a question that a lot of people are asking. Like, did Ferrari extend the wrong person, Did they decide to keep the wrong
I
person? Like
think that
personally,
they have a great driver lineup. I don't know why they wanted Lewis. I think if, they had an empty seat, it could have been offered to Lewis, but they have two great drivers. Why not renew the
I mean, I
contract?
kind of get it on Ferraris, and if you have the opportunity to get Lewis Hamilton, you're gonna get Lewis Hamilton,
I'm sure my mind will change when I see him there and he's actually performing. But what if he's not performing? What if he's another Daniel situation? Daniel's not performing. He hasn't
Yeah,
performed for
that's
like 3
true.
teams. So
Yeah,
maybe
I
there
don't
is an
know. Or it
expiration
could be
date.
more of like it could be more like an Alonso situation where he's actually doing pretty well
I
near the
think
end of his
Alonso's
career.
rare.
I mean, Lewis Hamilton's rare, Not that many people have done what he did. Obviously, recency bias with Verstappen's dominance. You forget that
Hmm.
that was Hamilton for a while.
Yeah, I
Hamilton
didn't
was the
experience
dominant
that. So
force. So yeah, speaking of things that we haven't really experienced, is next Grand Prix is the Chinese Grand Prix, the first time back on the calendar since 2019. So
yeah.
for those of us who might have been more Drive to Survive fans, we haven't really seen Chinese Grand Prix, but I
No,
know
we
that
have
in
not.
the past it's been a really fun one. I want to like test it out in the Formula One video game to see what it's like, but
Do you have the video game?
yeah, I have the video game, and I also have Formula One Manager, which is a different video game, which is also really
Uh-huh.
fun because you get to be like the team principal essentially, and you get to decide like, the car development, what you're going to put your money towards. And it's actually kind of interesting to do that game because one, you get to see like the decisions you make development wise, depending on which race is coming up, and like when you
Hmm.
decide to bring upgrades and stuff, and like the difference that makes. But yeah, it just teaches you a lot about like, okay, do we like prioritize downforce or do we prioritize like this other thing? And then, all the implications that has. So recommend it. It's kind of nerdy, but it's really fun. And then the regular F1 racing game is also fun.
No,
It
sounds
shows
super
you a lot
fun.
about, yeah, and I think it's fun to like kind of like preview a race by playing the game because then you
Hmm.
like know where all the turns are, where you can expect accidents to happen, kind of get
Yeah.
more of like that driver cam view of the race before it happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you can expect a F101 sprint episode from us where we'll update you and give you all the details on what a sprint weekend looks like. And this is the first sprint weekend of the 2024 season, which it is different than the 2023 season, just some slight changes. I don't think there's like a sprint shootout anymore. It's still the same concept with a different name, but once again, at the driver's press conference, Max was saying that whoever decided to put a sprint weekend during the Chinese GP was not in their right mind because they haven't been here in such a long time. And when there's a sprint weekend, there's less free practices. So there's only one practice round. So just about an hour to get the car into the
Before
right
quality.
window. Yeah. So we
I
shall
think
expect chaos.
I agree with him. I agree with Max. Like, why would you choose this one to do the sprint? Like already teams are losing a lot of, track data time. Like
Mhm.
I'm missing out on free practice on any other weekend where there's a sprint race, but I don't know why they would
Yeah.
do it in a place where no one's been
I
in a
think
while.
I think it was thought of from a different POV. So probably from like we haven't had a race in China in so many years. If we do a sprint weekend, it's like 2-in-1 races.
Yeah, it was
Get
probably
more
more of a
fans to go.
marketing play,
Yep. Hmm.
and less of like what does this mean for the racing and the drivers and the teams?
Yeah.
So that's constant tension in F1 these days. It's like what part of it is for the actual quality of the racing and what part of it is just for marketing. But I mean,
Yeah.
the better the quality of the racing is, I think that's also good for
Speaks for
marketing. But
itself, right?
maybe also the lack of preparation will lead to chaos, which will lead to an exciting race in other ways, which might also be good for marketing. So
Down for the chaos. Yeah.
yeah, it's a bunch of people making much more money than me making all these decisions. So
Yeah. Okay, so we're signing off, but we will be back in just about a week. Let us know your oh my god, WTF, and fave moment of this race. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Please leave us a rating so we know that you're listening. And if you are on Spotify, make sure to subscribe, do all the YouTube things. I said that wrong. It's fine. And join our Discord channel. We'll be back. Bye.